and we're on Siman Memchet. We start reading the Siman on Daf Ayin Zayin Amud Bet of the regular prints of Mishna Berurah. And the Rama wrote that we say Parashat Tamid, and Mishna Berurah explains because it is instead of Korban Tamid that they used to bring in the Bet HaMikdash. The main Korbanot of the day was Korban Tamid Shel Shachar, Tamid Shel Ben Harbayim. Therefore, we don't have it. That when a person learns about the Korbanot, it's as if, it's considered as if he brought the Korbanot. The Chafetz Chaim writes in the Akdamot Mishna Berurah, hence it's important to learn the parts of Kodshim and Taharot, because when you learn about the Korbanot, when you learn about Zvachim and Menachot, that is considered a purifying system as though a person said it themselves. So therefore, it says, Sheken Kipru Chazal, Shebizman Shem Bet HaMikdash Kayam, this is Gemara in Menachot, the famous Gemara in Menachot of Kuf Yud, that when we don't have the Menachot, when we don't have the Korbanot, ואין יכולים להקריב קורבנות, מי שעוסק בהן ובפרשיותיהן, מעלה עליו הכתוב כאילו הקריבון. When you learn about them, it's as if you have brought the קורבנות, ולכן יש אומרים גם כן סדר המערכה מטעם זה. There are those who add to this סדר מערכה as well, and says the Mishna Berurah, nowadays we say a parasha of Abaye Hava Mesader, ונראה לי פשוט למי שיודע ספר מצווה ללמוד בגמרא. Says the only reason that we say Abaye Hava Mesader Seder HaMa'aracha, so because we want to have a little part of Gemara as well. So first of all, same thing with Chok Yisrael, right? The importance of Chok Yisrael is you're getting every part of Torah inside your learning of the day. In the morning already, you've done Mikra, you've done Tanakh, you've done Mishnayot, you've done Gemara, you've done Zohar HaKadosh, some Halacha, some Musar, and then you go. But Abaye, Hava Mesader, was instituted in order to say some Gemara. So once they did it, they did a piece of Gemara. This, Lev Chaim writes this, Chaim Palaji, that they did Gemara in order that you should have a limud of the Gemara as well in the inyan of Korbanot. Because tefillah is the makom korban, so therefore they picked a Gemara that talks about that. But says the Mishna Berurah, pashut, if you could learn something legitimate, your Gemara, you could do a chazara on your daf or your Abu Yomi. That's what you should be doing, because that is the serious learning of the Gemara that you connect with. You're actually understanding the Gemara that you're saying. You have spent time on it, and so on and so forth. And says the Mishna Berurah, mitzvah lilmod b'gemara perush hamemra azot. If you're saying Abaye Hava, then you should do actually the perush of the Gemara in Masechet Yuma, the Flamed Gima. The Gemara there has this memorized from Masechet Yuma. At least you should see the Gemara with Rashi and with Tosafot and try to understand the basic meaning of the Gemara that you're saying every morning. The Mishnah Yodea Sefer, you should do that. Says the Mishna Berurah, וכן מה שאנו אומרים בכל יום, ענייני עשיית הקטורת, we say פרשת הקטורת, זה שיבין מה שהוא אומר. You should learn about פרשת הקטורת also to at least know what you are saying during the תפילה. ובזה תחשב לו אמירה במקום ההקטרה. And then, when you understand what you're saying, when you learned about it, then the saying of it is considered not just the parrot repeating, but it's considered that you actually have brought the korban. It's something meaningful and something beautiful. וכן כתבו הספרים, שאמר הגמרא כל העוסק בפרשת עולה, מפרשים say that this Gemara Menachot Kuf Yud that we mentioned, that when you learn about something is considered you did it, is when you understand what you're saying. When you learned about it properly, that's when it's considered that you said it. But if you don't, then it's not, of course, considered the same way. Now, women, did they say Parashat Tamid? Ovadia says, no, same as with Rabbi Shaul, says you don't have to say it. And Rabbi Chaim Palaji in Shelot Tshuvot Lev Chaim says the same thing as well. Now, there's a Ben Ish Chai that says when you do Parashat Tamid, and we say it's considered you brought Korban Tamid, doesn't mean that you brought Korban Tamid. A Yachid doesn't mean Korban Tamid. Korban Tamid is a Korban Tzibur. What it means is the effect of your tefillah, it's the effect as if Kohanim would be bringing Korban Tamid in the Beit HaMikdash. And therefore, he also writes in Torah Lishma, we generally speaking assume that he wrote Torah Lishma, even though the Chabadi has a whole tshuva that he's not sure, and he seems to side with the fact that he didn't write Torah Lishma. But at the end of the day, even he says in Kabbalah, Nekabel, from Avraham Ades and many others, you see that Ben Ish Chai was actually the author of Torah Lishma. Torah Lishma was written not anonymously, but it was signed a name, the Chaskel Kachli. And Rabbi Adas is the great-grandfather of the current Rabbi Adas, Rosh Yeshiva of Kol Yaakov. He said the Ben Ish Chai is the author of this. And it says Yechaskel Kochel is Gematria, exactly Yosef Chaim. So he's written this in the Ilum Shem, and many of the Shuvot are literally identical. Well, according to everybody, Ben Ish Chai was the publisher of it. But he said it seems like he found the Ktav Yad and he published the Ktav Yad. But Rabbi Avraham Adas said that no, it's himself that he wrote it by Ilum Shem. Nevertheless, he writes when you say in Bracha Modi, say V'Yishei Yisrael Utfilatam, he's davening your Shemona Esrei, that Hashem should accept the korbanot. You should have kavanah and the korban tamid that you said in the beginning of Tefillah in the Parashat Korbanot. Parashat Korban Tamid, Parashat Olah, all those things that you said, that should be accepted in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu as if you actually said it yourself. And again, as we mentioned before, even it covers Abaye, Hava Mesader, because even though that's just the Gemara in Yuma, but nevertheless, it's about Korbanot as well, so that's also included. Maran Chida actually writes in Shelot Utshuvot Yosef Ometz that the reason that we have instituted that memra in the tefillah is because we want to say Gemara, yes, but we want to say Gemara that relates to the Inyane Korbanot, because after all, our tefillah is a replacement of Makom Tmidin Tiknum. It's coming to replace the Korbanot. Therefore, we say it in that way. So it says the Mishna Berurah. Hatava Magen Avraham, Parashat HaKorbanot Yomar Ba'amida. Magen Avraham says, when you say Korbanot, you should say standing up. Chacham Ovadia writes, you don't have to. It's mitzvah mina mufchar, it's beautiful to say it Ba'amida, you don't have to. The Magen Avraham who says you have to say it standing up is because Dukmata Korbanot Sheh Ba'amida. When you brought the Korban, you have to stand up. You can't sit and cross your legs and sip your drink. When you bring a Korban, you have to be standing. So therefore, this that's coming to replace Korban, also you should be standing as well. So it says the Mishna Berurah by Mesharet Tshuva, Shekam Achronim Shecholkim al Zeh, brings many who disagree with this, and the Pri Megadim. By the way, Kaf HaChaim also says this. Kaf HaChaim says you don't need to stand up. Even Kaf HaChaim, who's a Chasidah Kadisha, a Prisha, a tremendous personality of Torah and Chassidut, he still says that you don't have to stand, and he says that's the minhag as well. He was a student of the Ben Ish Chai, and then he left his wife and all of his Sfarim in Baghdad, and he went to Eretz Yisrael to learn Torah. So his wife came to Ben Ish Chai. This is an old question in the Gemara. Akol ma'alin Eretz Yisrael. Can a person just leave his family and go to Eretz Yisrael? Can a husband force a wife? Can a wife force a husband to go to Eretz Yisrael? Akol ma'alin. Say, wife asked him, what do I do? My husband left to Eretz Yisrael. I'm here in Baghdad. So okay, so he could sell some of his Sfarim and have enough money to take the family and follow suit. He went and he started learning in the Yeshiva Bet El. The Yeshiva Mikbalim, a tremendous Seder Hayom. Tremendous, their Shahari took like 4 hours. Al Pi Kabbalah, everything, Al Pi Kabbalah, tremendous life of Torah, And even with all those, he says the Maaseh, the Minhag is not to stand when you say Korbanot, and you don't necessarily have to follow the Magen Avraham. So it says the Mishna Berurah, or Pri Megadim, the Pri Megadim writes that Mikol Makom, the Parashat Tamid Raui Lamod. At least in Parashat, if you don't stand by all the Korbanot, but Parashat Tamid you should stand. That's the main one. Shkorim V'Sibur B'Kol Ram. That you should stand. And the Ben Ish Chai writes that we don't, in Sibur you should not say it standing. If you're the Shliach Tzibur and you're doing Korbanot, you're doing Parashat Tamid with Tzibur, you should not stand up. Why shouldn't you stand up? Why shouldn't you stand up? Because you're showing, why did we stop saying Aseret Dibrot with Tzibur? Because people would, or why do Chabad say you should not stand when they read Aseret Dibrot? Because you're differentiating within different parts of the Torah, and then next thing people are going to say, oh, Aseret Dibrot is the main part of Torah, the rest of it is Midat Chasidut, right? Is 603 suggestions, right? So therefore, that's what the meaning is to say. Rambam worked very hard to eradicate this minhag that they cannot stand. Nobody should be standing at the time of Aseret Dibrot. Nevertheless, the Ben Ish Chai says that in Sibur you do not say it ba'amidah, but if you're at home alone davening the parts of Korbanot b'yachid, then it's fit and proper to stand up when you're reading Parashat Korbanot, especially Parashat Tamid, because of the fact that it's Dugmat Korbanot, that was ba'amidah. But in Tzibur, you should not change the minhag of the Tzibur because it's considered yuhara. You should not do it as yuhara. You're sticking out. You show that you're better than other people. You're more special than other people. If the minhag is not do it, the Kaf HaChaim says the minhag was not to do it. In Eretz Yisrael, but Shchai says the minhag was not to do it like that in Baghdad. So therefore, don't do it. But if it's in a way that doesn't stick out, doesn't stand out, nobody notices, then it would be fine. When you're doing it b'yachid, that would be fine as well. Okay. Now says next now the actual Seif in Shcharuch. This was the Ramah, just the preface to the Siman. The Shabbat omrim etzet parashat tamid psukim musaf de Shabbat. On Shabbat we add the psukim of musaf of Shabbat. Aval lo b'Rosh Chodesh veYom Tov. But we don't say it on Rosh Chodesh and Yom Tov mipenesh korim b'Torah b'psukim musaf, because there you have it as part of the reading of the Torah and Yom Tov or Rosh Chodesh. The psukim of Yom Tov and Rosh Chodesh are said in Kriyat Torah and publicly, so you don't need to add it in the text of the Tefillah. But on Shabbat we just do Parashat HaShavua. We don't do necessarily the psukim of Shabbat. So therefore, we instituted that the psukim of Shabbat should be said in the text as part of the text of the Tefillah. So it says the Ramah, v'yesh omrim, there are those who add shemaskirin gam musaf Rosh Chodesh, that even by musaf of Rosh Chodesh you add the musaf Rosh Chodesh v'chen noagin. That's the minhag. Kedei lefarsem shehu Rosh Chodesh, in order to make it more publicized. V'chen hu lekaman in Tav Chaf Aleph. You have it later on in Siman Tav Chaf Aleph as well, to which Mishna Berurah writes, Kedei lefarsem aval Yom Tov en tzrichim lefarsem. Yom Tov, he says, you don't have to be mefarsem. Everyone knows when Sukkot is. Everyone knows when Pesach is. Shavuot, we know the Yamim Tovim don't need any, publicizing, additional publicizing. But Rosh Chodesh, you need to publicize. Therefore, you put it in the Tefillah as well. Shkvaru mefursam. It's already, Yom Tov is known to people from the day before. Our Shabbat, afal pishu mefursam. But Shabbat, even though that's well known to people, you have to prepare for it. It's asked you to work on Shabbat and so on. Omrim ota b'shacharit. We still say it in Shacharit, even though that according to Marash Charuch, you have to say the psukim of Musaf of the Shabbat in Shacharit of Shabbat. Nevertheless, Kaf HaChaim writes that the minhag is not like Maran. The minhag is like Ari Kadosh, that we don't say it. We don't say it. And the reason is because the tefillah of Shacharit is instead of Korban Tamid. And you don't want to mix that with Korban Musaf. You want to wait until Tefillat Musaf. Therefore, we follow the Ari Kadosh like we do in many occasions when it comes to Hilchot Tefillah, and we wait for Tefillat Musaf to say the Pesukim of Musaf. We do not say it in Shacharit of Shabbat morning. שהרי אין יכולים, continues the Mishna Berurah, לקרותה בתורה, מפני שאין בה אלא שני פסוקים. There's only 2 psukim of Musaf, and you can't read it really in the Torah because you don't read from the Torah less than 3 psukim, and therefore we put it as part of the Tefillah, and we don't have it in the Torah itself. So it says, Shulchan Aruch, we're starting now, Siman Mem Tet, and that is about the fact that you can read Kriyat Shema Bal Peh. Can you read Kriyat Shema Bal Peh? Now, what's the problem? The problem is, Devarim shebichtav iyata rashai lomram Bal Peh. Tanakh, you're not allowed to read it Bal Peh. That's the halacha. Just like Torah Bal Peh, you cannot write. It would be asur to write Mishnayot, asur to write the parts of Gemara. But it was a special heter of Rabbi. Rabbi wrote it because et la'asot l'Hashem heferu toratecha. Right? If there's a time, sometimes there's time to do for Hashem, and we nullify the Torah for a greater good. In this case, a greater good was the Torah should not be nishtakach miYisrael, so Rabbi wrote it. By the way, no one really pays attention to what Rashi says and the pasuk in Tehillim. What does Rashi say? Et la'asot l'Hashem heferu toratecha. No one knows? Any Tehillim readers here? No? As I always say, like we end up being Talmid Chacham midrabanan, Amaretz min Torah. Right? We learn all the Gemarot and Halachot, and we are Amaretz Teoraita. The actual Torah, we don't really learn Tanakh. Rashi says, Et la'asod la'Hashem heferu toratecha means if you set a time for learning Torah, you're disgracing Torah. You're nullifying the Torah. That means, of course, you have to have kiyut mitim Torah. You have to have a minimum time. I learn minimum 3 hours in the morning, minimum 3 hours at night, right? Well, it really should be 4.5 hours because Rambam says if a guy is a balabayit, Rambam writes the guy is a balabayit, unfortunately he has to work the rest of the day. He only has 9 hours to learn. That's what Rambam writes in the Talmud Torah. So minimum learning. Different times, yeah. And that's why they were successful at different times. So yeah, they didn't have Snapchat and all the Dvarim HaKadoshim, Facebook, right? They didn't have a rectangular thing in their house, Yeah, a window to Gehinnom. So that's that's a minimum. But if you say, I did my minimum, I did my kiyut itim Torah, kavat itim Torah, I did, says the David HaMelech, you are disgracing the Torah. You're nullifying the Torah. It means it's the minimum. Every second that you can add, you have to still learn, right? If you learned your morning thing and then you saw your appointment was canceled, what do? You go to the coffee shop or you sit and learn? So if you say, I did my kiyut itim already, says David HaMelech, Eferu Toratecha. You say, Et la'asod Hashem, Eferu Toratecha. But that, nevertheless, that's the halakha, that Dvarim Shebal Peh, when Torah Shebal Peh can't write, was a special heter for Rabbi Yisraeli to write it. And same way is opposite, that Dvarim Shebichtav, Iyata Rashai Lomram Bal Peh. You cannot say Tanakh Bal Peh. You have to read it from inside, right? You'll see some of the Rabbanim, Hasidim, some of the special, they're very makpid. When they're even saying a drasha, teaching Torah, if they quote the pasuk, they'll look inside, they'll have the actual pasuk there printed, and they'll actually read it from inside. They're being machmir for this halacha. So, can you say Shema Bal Peh? Right? When you say Shema Yisrael, you're saying it Bal Peh, right? Right? And many people say the rest of it also Bal Peh. Says mutar or not. Says the Shulchan Aruch. Afal gav the Kaim Alan, even though the Gemara says in Masachet Gitin, Daf Samech Amud Bet, Devarim she bichtav Iyata Rashai Lomram Bal Peh. So you cannot say things that are Torah bichtav. You cannot say Bal Peh. Kol davar shragil v'shagur b'pi hakol. Anything that everyone knows Baal Peh, everyone knows it by heart, the whole community knows it by heart, is so pashut. Everyone knows by heart, right? Shema Yisrael, everyone knows by heart. Those things, says the Mishna Berurah, says the Shulchan Aruch rather, כגון קריאת שמע וברכת כהנים, פרשת התמיד, וכיוצא בהן, all of those things that everybody knows by heart is mutar to say them Baal Peh. Now, says the Mishnah Berurah, you know what else people know Baal Peh? So first, before we get to that, what does a blind person, Rahman al-Litzlan, no one should know, right? There's a person in the community that recently just went blind. And you see him walk. Yes, it's such a good personality and such a positive. We see him walk is a walking musar of how much we take for granted, right? 90% of a person's information come from your eyes. You don't even, you don't realize how good it is to be able to see. Yeah, so Rahman, it's not someone that became blind. What's his halacha? Huh? So Mishna Berurah says, "Suma mutar lekrot Baal Peh mishum et lasot laHashem meferu toratecha." It's the same thing that we just said. The heter that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi had to write Torash Baal Peh. Suma also is no other way. It's going to be a nullified of the Torah for him if he doesn't do it. So therefore, it's et lasot laHashem. You could do it. V'hu adin imhu bebet asurim. Same is what the person Rahman al-Litzlan is in jail, and he doesn't have Sfarim. He wants to say things about Peh in order to be learning. You could say it Baal Peh, right? Nowadays they have Daf Yomi Shurim there too, right? We have to institute an Amud Yomi there. So that's the heter that you have. Now Kaf HaChaim writes that this isur of saying things that are bichtav Baal Peh, it's machloket if it's isur deoraita or is isur derabbanan. The concept of the varim shebichtav yata rashai lomram Baal Peh, is it deoraita concept or is it derabbanan concept, right? And it seems from the Kaf HaChaim that he holds it's derabbanan. It's not isur deoraita. So that's good. It's just because every time that now you have safek, you could say safek derabbanan lekula. It gives you a little bit more of an open hand to deal with this issue. As we will see, some things are not so clear, right? And how much of it is isur? How much? If you say, I want to say one word, or half a pasuk. Can I say half a pasuk, Baal Peh? What's the shiur? Is a shiur one pasuk, one paragraph, or is it? It's a drasha that the Gemara says. Yeah, part of it is that. Part of it is that. For instance, the Gemara says in Baba Batra, Daf Chaf Aleph, Gemara says Yoav ben Tzruya, he was the head of the army. He was the Sar Sabah of David HaMelech. And when he went to fight Amalek, he killed all the male. And all the females, he left alone. Why? Because his Rebbe, when he was a kid, mistaught the pasuk and said, Timche Zachar Amalek mitachat hashamayim. See? One little detail. Instead of saying Zecher Amalek, is Zachar Amalek. And he, as a kid, learned that, and he never rushed up. So he went to kill Amalek, and he killed the Zachar. Can you imagine? So one little, a lot of questions that could be asked in that. So, but nevertheless, you see the importance of teaching it properly, and therefore, now the Gemara says the Chikre Lev, Rabbi Yosef Hazan, a tremendous person. The Shelot Chuvot Chikre Lev, which is all like very deep, complicated, analytic chakirot on all of the miktzot of Shas. He was the grandfather of Chaim Palaji. He was a Rav in Turkey, and was the Gdol Ador, and he was the father of Rav Chaim Palaji's mother, right? Tremendous family of Talmidei Chachamim, the Chazan family, and afterwards the Palaji family were all interconnected. Both of them tremendous like luminaries of lineage of all shalshelet of Chachamim and Poskim. So it says the Chikre Lev, even teva achat, even one word, asur to say balpeh, right? This, by the way, happens when you're reading from the Torah. A Baal Koreh sometimes knows the next pasuk, and as you are rolling the amud, you just say the next pasuk, balpeh, asur.
Wow.
Right? You have to read it from inside. Even one word of it you cannot say balpeh, right?
Just because I say Vayomer,
Again, if you have a pasuk that's not shagur b'fi hakol, then you have dvarim shebichtav yatar rashai lomram balpeh. The Gemara says. The question is, how much of it is asur? Can I say one word balpeh if I know what the next word is and I haven't rolled the Torah yet? Right? So the Chikre Lev says is asur. Knesset Gdolah, also from Turkey, right? Knesset Gdolah disagrees. Knesset Gdolah is Rabbi Chaim ben Israel ben Beneshti. Rav Chaviv, they used to call him, right? That's the Asher Tevot. Tremendous personality. The Chida writes, Maran Chida, Rabbi Shalom writes, that no posek could pass in anything without first looking at Knesset Gdolah in that sugya. It's tremendous. So Knesset Gdolah disagrees. He says only a dibur that has mashma'ut, something that it's context. Say Vayomer. What do you say? I said nothing. I said timna. It was doesn't have any mashma'ut. But if you already said, you say achod lotan timna, then there's already said something, right? Something of mashma'ut that happens to be opposite. That's a little bit different. But if you say something that has mashmaut, even if it's part of a pasuk, then it's going to be asur. Says, yeah. So Torah Lishma, again, assuming that it's Ben Ish Chai, the Ben Ish Chai in Torah Lishma, he says it has to be a shiur of Kriyat Torah, which the minimum is 3 psukim, right? So he took all the Rabbanim out of the Geinam. Because now in Darshan, you want to call it Pasuk Balpeh, usually you're not Darshaning 3 Psukim at the time. So that would be a heter. If you happen to know the Psukim by heart, and others don't, it's not something that's Shagur B'fi Hakol, you can still say it Mishna Berurah, and it will be mutar. Right? But he even says, the Torah Lishma says, L'chatchila, that's b'di'evet. L'chatchila, even teva achat. So the Chatchila passes like Rabbi Yosef Chazan in Chikre Lev that even one letter, one word rather would be asur, but says Mikaradin up to 3 psukim, you're still good to go. So it says the Mishna Berurah. He brings from the Radbaz that the Radbaz was Rabbeinu David ben Zimra. He was the Nagid, the last of the Nagidim in Egypt, in Mitzrayim. He lived a very, very blessed, long life well into his 90s, which back then was a very mitzvah, like we were talking about 600 years ago almost, right? He, at the end of his life, he overlapped with Maran Shulchan. After 50 years of being the Nagid in Mitzrayim, he moved to Eretz Yisrael. And Maran was a young posek, he was the Rav of Eretz Yisrael, Maran. And Maran, as kavod, every time that he wanted to pass in a davar tziburi, a communal psak, he would first take the psak to the Radbaz for him to sign as the Zaken HaHorah, and then he would pass it. So the Radbaz writes in Chelek Aleph, Chelek Dalet has to be. In Siman Kuf Lamed Hey, לקרוא את הפרשה בעל פה בשעה שליח ציבור קורא, אני נזהר, אבל איני מוכר לאחרים. You want to do שניים מקרא ואחת תרגום, right? So you want to just, the Chazan, you have a beautiful Chazan, he's clearly saying the words, and you want to say after him, is that considered בעל פה? or is that considered me piggybacking on his Bichtav? He's reading from Bichtav. I'm just repeating what he says. Is that mutar? Says Radbaz, I don't do it. But when I see other people do it, I don't yell at them. Right? I don't stop them. Mishum de'esh poskim arbe. There are many poskim, says the Radbaz. Shesovrim sha'isur hu davka im motzi bazeh la'acharim yedei chuvata. Second big kula. Second big leniency. Says the Radbaz, because there are many poskim who hold the isur is when you are being motzi acherim yedei chuvah. So he is motzi acherim yedei chuvah. He's reading it from inside. I just want to be yotzei shnayim v'chata. I don't want to go to Geinam. So I'm saying it after him because I want to do my chiyuv. I'm not being motzi anyone yedei chuvah. Therefore, because of those poskim, even though that I'm machbir myself, but because there are those poskim who are mekel, I don't stop other people who do it. So that's the second big leniency. The Umram Baal Peh, to say him by heart, Mishe Doresh Parabim Baharbe Psukim Shebatorah V'Kashelo Lechapes B'Chol Sha'a B'Chumash. A darshan, that's always a rav, that's always darshaning, and he quotes a lot of psukim as a davar militza to beautify the drash and to bring rayot from psukim. And some of the psukim you use 100 times a year. You say them, so you know them by heart. Other people don't necessarily know them by heart. You have to have like a pile of Tanakh Sfarim in front of you every time to quote them, or can you just say it by heart? It says the Mishna Berurah, a chacham that's doresh barabim. It's hard to have a Tanakh and every time say it like that. And Sibur is going to be waiting until he finds it and whatnot. Says the Mishna Berurah, maybe you could be, because of Kavod HaSibur, you could be Mekel and rely on those poskim that we just mentioned before. And Chacham Ovadia himself used to do it. Right? Ovadia used to say, Joshua, you speak for 3 hours. You wouldn't even, time would fly. You even realize that the time passed, right? Mazuz wrote, this is like a Reader's Digest, he wrote a piece when Chacham Ovadia put out the Chelek Chet of the Rabbi Omer. He wrote a piece as thanking Hoda'ah for HaKadosh Baruch Hu that there's another Rabbi Omer out. And he said there, he's very open. He says that people will say, why? It takes people's time, 3 hours. He says, you know what? Because they're jealous. They can't, no one would listen to them for 3 hours. No one would even listen to them for 30 minutes. They're so jealous of Ovadia. That's why they say it like that. But there's nobody like Ovadia that says it, and it is, it's so entertaining. And he was very, very entertaining. It was a pleasure to listen to him. And he would quote a lot of psukim in the middle of the thing. He was not looking at every one of them. He knew it by heart, right? Knew it by heart. David Ozeri, he came to eulogize Chacham Ovadia right after he was niftar in Shloshim to Baltimore, and he said his sons one time was in the car. His sons wanted to test him on Tanakh, and there was this sefer that they had written, and they wanted to know that the address of the psukim was not there. And they would say the pasuk, you would finish it and tell them where it is in Tanakh, with the chapter and verse. Like, it was not just the Talmid Chacham in Torah, but he was, in Gemara and Torah Shpat Peh and Halacha, but he knew Tanakh very well as well. So it says, the Mishna Berurah, maybe a person could be mekel for that, and that seems to have been the minhag as well. We're out of time. Bezrat Hashem, we'll continue this in this.